It's been a month since the NDP ended its long-standing supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals, and the dynamics in the House of Commons have been uncertain, to say the least, ever since. The Liberals this week voted against the bloc's non-binding motion around old age security. They say to avoid setting a bad procedural precedent. But the move risks the precarious holding pattern between the parties as the bloc threatens to start talks with the NDP and Conservatives as early as this week to potentially bring down the government. The NDP, meanwhile, has enough votes to keep the Liberals in power when it comes to matters of non-confidence, while leader Jagmeet Singh has maintained they'll make voting choices on a case-by-case basis. So will the NDP be making new demands in exchange for their support? NDP House Leader Peter Julian is with me now. Mr. Julian, good to see you. As always, thank you for making the time.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be with you.
I'll start off on the bloc's proposition and essentially their ultimatum. They say they're willing to start talks ASAP, maybe even already. Have you had any conversations with your counterpart in the bloc about the potential to topple the government?
No, I haven't. And as House leaders, we're reaching out to all of the parties every day. But I think there's a difference between what they might be saying publicly and what they're actually doing privately.
They seem to be serious. Mr. Blanchet seems to be serious that he is willing, though, if he doesn't get what he wants from the government, to force a conversation about toppling them. He will have very willing partners in the Conservatives. In the NDP, as we mentioned in the introduction, Mr. Singh has said that he'll go on a case-by-case basis. Is there something specific, for example, electoral reform, particular measures around corporate greed, that the NDP wants to see the government acquiesce on to maintain your party's support, should that be the case?
But that's a good question. I mean, Jagmeet Singh was very clear when we ripped up the confidence and supply agreement that we're proceeding vote by vote like we did during COVID, and that was to the benefit of all Canadians. The NDP was able to force the Parliament at the time to put in place measures to help small businesses, to help families, help seniors, students, people with disabilities, and to put in place for workers paid sick leave for the first time in Canadian history. Those are all very clear, tangible results of the NDP proceeding vote by vote. As far as what Jagmeet has been talking about and the NDP has been talking about, where the Liberals have always been weak, is when it comes to corporate greed. Canadians are gouged when they go to buy their groceries. They are gouged in a number of different ways, whether it's cell phone fees that are far higher than other countries, bank fees, gas price gouging. And the Liberals have always resisted taking measures. When we talk about vote by vote, it's pushing for measures that will make a difference in Canadians' lives. And Jagmeet Singh has already a proven track record. We're seeing that in the polls. The NDP is, according to a number of polls last week, has passed the Liberals in terms of popular support. People are seeing that, and I think they appreciate that Jagmeet Singh is there to get the job done and make a difference in the lives of Canadians.
A couple of things to parse apart there. When you talk about the polls, I think you're referencing Abacus data, which showed that the NDP is ahead of the Liberals outside of Quebec, still 20 points behind the Conservatives. Nanos polling, which polls for, or Nanos research rather, which polls for CTV, shows your party and the Liberals in a statistical tie for the first time since 2015. At the same time, like I pointed out, still 20 points behind the Conservatives, and the cash on hand that the NDP has is far less. I think that the latest numbers show that 16 million for the Conservatives, 2.8 million for the Liberals, 289,000 for your party. The analysis coming out of that is that your party is going to be unwilling, completely unwilling to go to an election before Christmas. Can you respond to that?
Well, first off, in terms of the number of small donors to the NDP, we're seeing a steady increase in the number of people who are contributing to the party. But the reality is, fortunately, we have electoral laws in this country that during an electoral period, it's a level playing field, as you know, Bessie, when all parties can only spend a certain amount, and the NDP will be very competitive with the other two parties in the next election campaign. So it's not a question of financing, it's a question of getting things done. And the NDP's track record and Jagmeet Singh's track record, the dental care program, an enormous success, the anti-SCAB legislation, affordable housing, finally forcing the Liberals to start building affordable housing in this country after 20 years of neglect, and pharmacare, which will hopefully in the coming week pass the Senate and become the law of the land, which will mean that for millions of people who suffer from diabetes and pay $1,000 or $1,500 a month for their diabetes medication and devices, it will finally be available to them.
Just to be clear, though, I mean, is your party in principle okay with an election before Christmas? And again, I understand that there are spending limits during a campaign, but the discrepancy between what your party has on hand when it comes to cash and what the Conservatives have on hand do reflect the relative readiness with which you would approach that campaign. And I know you're saying you're competitive, and I'm not taking away from the results in those by-elections, but it is difficult at this point. It's been 9 months of the Conservatives 20 points ahead. Is it not understandable that Canadians would take the view that essentially at this point, all the legislative stuff you pointed to has happened, that you're just keeping the Liberals in power because you don't want to lose an election?
The reality is we have the best track record over the last few years of actually delivering for people. That's a track record that Jagmeet Singh is proud of. His approval record is very high, his approval rating among Canadians. Pierre Poilievre's support, quite frankly, because over the period of time when he was leading in the polls, he hasn't delivered any sort of vision of this country. And the reality is, I think, in an election campaign where it's Jagmeet Singh's vision contrasted with Pierre Poilievre and the slogans that they're putting forward, we're very comfortable with that head-to-head fight. And in the by-elections, and
you're ready for that this year?
We're ready for that at any time. My signs are ready to go at any time. And in a minority parliament, that's what all members of parliament should be thinking.
I'm going to leave it on that note. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time, Mr. Julian, as always. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
That's NDP House Leader Peter Julian after a quick break today, bracing for an early election, as you heard there. The Sunday strategy session with Kathleen Monk, Scott Reed, and Shakira Chambers will be here with their predictions next.